Hey there folks, thanks for tuning in to the Speaker Builder channel, and today I want to talk about input cables, and this is an update to the video that I've already published in which I talked about a variety of other lesser expensive cables. But in that process I was seeking after a set of cables that would rival these Ruby cables that I bought many years ago. I never really sort of A/B tested anything back then. I just made a selection. I went to AudioQuest, trusting them, they do make good cables, and made a selection based on virtually on the price. I just wasn't willing to spend more than what I spent on these. I don't remember now how much I spent, but it wasn't hundreds, I'm sure of that. I just don't have the stomach for that then or now. But so I was trying to, so I bought a whole bunch of these, and since I have a three-way active speaker system, I need a host of interconnect cables to connect the not only connect the components to the control amplifier, but then control amplifier to the active electronic crossover, and then that crossover has three sets that go to the various amplifiers. So there's a lot of interconnect cables involved, and that makes this issue even more important in my case. So because the signal's going through a multitude of these, and I have discovered that if there is a constraint in the quality, that constraint is additive. So if you have one dirty cable and two dirty cables, or let's say less clear cable, if you have one less clear cable and I'm going through another one, going through a third one, that constraint is additive. If you just clean up one, you get a little better quality. Clean up two of them, even better. Three of them, even better. So that was kind of my thinking back then. I had not A/B tested that idea until this just recently and confirmed that. But so that's why I bought all of these. The most expensive cable I was willing to spend money on was these Rubies, which are not available anymore. So now I'm doing this A/B testing, and having done the video, the first video on input cables, interconnect cables, I had not achieved the goal that I had set out to accomplish, and that was to find something that was going to be superior to these. And having never tested, I didn't know if there was any such thing. Probably there are, but am I willing to spend the money in that? And what's in the price range that I'm constraining myself to, say about $100, and that in that ballpark, $150 max? Could I find something that would be better than these? So my first attempt was the super cables I mentioned in the other video. They did not perform as well as these, and then none of the others, of course, did. So in fact, most of the other cables, there is a step down between these AudioQuest Rubies and the AudioQuest Turquoise. And so at least any cable that I was going to buy that was going to get up into this range had to be better than these. In fact, at one point I had taken these out and I put these in place, and I discovered these really have an almost artificial kind of a sound to them. So it's really amazing. Now the differences, again, I'm talking about are small, so I don't want folks to get too excited thinking that this makes a dramatic difference but it's hearable. Now, again, I have an active three-way speaker system, no passive crossover parts in line to the drivers, so there's no constraint there. And then I've selected high-quality amplifiers, and then I've selected high-quality speaker cable. I've tested my speaker cable in another video I have on SpeakerWire to see which wire is, the wires I'm using, are they actually cleanest thing that I can find. I had somebody online tell me about some other cables I'd like to try, speaker cables. But in any case, I've gone through and systematically cleaned up the every link in the chain, as it were. So input cables was the last stretch, and it's really surprising. Once you've done all that, you've done all the work and cleaned up all the different links in the chain, now you come to the input cables, and there is a difference. Not huge, but it is a audible difference between these two. So I wanted to get something anyway that would rival these, even be better than the Rubies, within a reasonable price range. I'm not spending $200 and $400 on an input cable that's driving a $500 amplifier. Now, maybe if I get my tube amps and I spend $1,000 on those, now maybe I could justify a couple, $200, $300. I don't know. It's just nuts how much money some of this stuff costs. And so I'm trying to be within reason here. So let me talk about my experiences. I made some notes here, so let's see. I had, of course, we talked in the past video about the Beldens, the 1192s, and the Mogamis. They, of course, were not even up to the same speed as these Turquoise. So then after I did that video, I started chasing other cables to see what if I could find something that would match or be superior to these rubies. So the first purchase I made was the AudioQuest Big Sur. I went back to AudioQuest, having been discouraged by everything else that I tried. These were $110, and they're slightly below the quality of these. One of the other things I was disappointed about with those, the Big Surs, they had, of course, stereo connectors on either end, but then it went down to a single cable, and then there was a single cable going around and then divided again at the other end. I didn't really like that idea, so thought that was kind of cheap in my humble opinion. Whether it really makes a sonic difference or not to the kind of wire they used, that's another story. But anyway, I'm a big fan of having the cable separate. So those, I returned those. Fortunately, I've been buying these stuff, and folks will allow you to return these in most cases. So then I got really desperate. I spent another $120 this time on AudioQuest Red River cables. Those were separate cables from one end to the other, not integrated into one. And they were close to the turquoise, probably a little bit better. I didn't have those at the same time, of course, to compare the Big Sur to the Red River. But, you know, I'm buying one, I'm returning it right off. Buying another one, returning that one. I got really desperate then at that point, because the other AudioQuest cables that are available, now you're talking $150, $200, $300. It's crazy. And I'm not unhappy with these, so I'm not going to spend $300, $400 on other cables to try to get past the rubies. So what else is out there? So I got really desperate. There's a company called Better Cables, and they had a pair of cables for $75, which isn't small money. And so I bought those, and they were slightly below the quality of the turquoise. And that's kind of what I've been finding. Nothing is getting up to even the turquoise cables. And these, again, had a kind of a cheap sound to them, a slightly cheap sound to them compared to the rubies. So I definitely had to get above these. And then the next, I was really desperate now, and I found these cables online, actually on Amazon. They're called Oyaide or Oyaide, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Oyaide. And it's a Japanese company, and they make a number of interesting cables. And the interesting thing about these, and both of these are two sets. The green and white is one set, and the orange are another set. And so I'm going to talk actually about the orange ones, since that's the first ones I bought. What's interesting about these is if you see that, it's a flat design. Wide here and narrow there. Very interesting how they design these. They're not targeted to go particularly one way or the other. So there's no arrow. Like with the rubies, they have an arrow on them that will tell you which way they're supposed to go. This arrow goes this way. So the signal feeding the amp, for example, goes out here and there, and it's a balanced line. Again, it's not balanced. I don't have balanced components. If you had balanced components, you wouldn't have just two connectors. But balanced components require a balanced line that have three connectors. So all RCA are fundamentally an unbalanced system. But these, it's kind of a mixing of the words, but these are balanced cable. That is, the grounding is only on one end and not the other. So both lines, there are two wires inside that carry the signal, and then the insulated outside core carries the ground from just one component, either this or this one, but not both. So the signal isn't carried by the insulation, by the core, that the outer side, the outside wires that block any RF radio frequency interference and like that. So in any case, so it's balanced, but that's a misnomer in the audiophile world, because a true balanced line again has three connections. But in any case, so these apparently are not balanced, in that they don't have any arrow telling you which way they're supposed to be connected to. So they could be connected either way. So for whatever that purpose that is, but so I put these in out of real desperation. These are gold connectors. They're not really superior. I don't think they're all that superior. A connector on the end here, kind of plastic, but they are gold plated. And I put these in, and I was very surprised. They are a little brighter than the turquoise, so I did get into this range. They're not as bright as the rubies. So I listened to them for a little while, and I discovered, they have a warmth to them and a musicality to them. And as I would swap back to the rubies, I found the rubies were not only very bright, and again, I have a very bright system with these titanium dome focal tweeters, or the equivalent today would be the Etons, the hard dome Etons with ceramic coated. Those are I own a pair of those. They're wonderful. Those are also very bright. So very bright hard dome tweeters in an active system can be a bit much. And so I'm actually discovering that these cables don't constrain the high frequencies at all, and the system is actually a little too bright, and that's been a challenge that I've been trying to wrestle with, how to deal with that excessive brightness. My ears are just starting to tell me that over the last couple of years, the high frequencies of this system is just a little too much. Well, what's really interesting is I went to these cables and put them in, and I started listening over a period of a week or so. I got used to the lesser high frequency response of these compared to the rubies, and then went back to the rubies, and they're a little brittle. They're a little too bright. In fact, I don't like the rubies, at least in one link of the chain. So to explain that again, there's a cable that going between the let's say the CD player and the preamp, and then between the preamp and the active electronic crossover, the Phil Marchand unit. So that's the one I'm replacing. That's 1 meter long. And then there are 3 other cables, one each for the 3 stereo amplifiers. So the signal will, at any point, be it the tweeters, the mid-range, or the bass, will go through 3 sets of input cables. So you replace just one of these rubies with these, and it reduced the high frequency response a bit, dampened those high frequencies down just a little bit, and actually I like it better. The other interesting quality of these is they had a warmer low frequency response to them compared to the rubies. So I just like these so much I couldn't take them out. I put them in and I lived with them for a week or two, and I had to leave them in. I couldn't ever go back to the rubies now. And that's what I was looking for, something that would be better. I didn't expect it would be less bright, but I actually like this system, being it's already kind of too bright, with these that are less bright. My goal now is to buy another set of these and put them in line with the CD player to the control amplifier. That would give, of the 3, let's say to the tweeter amplifier, to the tweeters, you've got one set of input cables going from the CD player to the input to the control amp. The next one goes from the control amp to the active electronic crossover, and the third one goes from the crossover to the tweeter amp. So the high frequencies go through 3 sets of cables. And so it's a really interesting process if the system is too bright to dampen it down a bit by replacing these bright rubies that I have, again, 3 sets of rubies in those 3 different places. Replace one of them with these. I could replace another set between the CD player and the control amplifier with a set of these, and that would bring me down a little bit more, and that might be ideal. That might be the perfect place to go. The other interesting thing is that with the turntable playing old records, be it 60s, 70s, 80s LPs, those records don't tend to be near as bright as the CDs. And so I actually could use, I can actually just use one of these sets, and from the turntable to the control amplifier, retain I actually, from my turntable, bought a pair of these, cut the ends off, and wired them into the turntable so that the turntable is utilizing a set of rubies as well as a CD player. And I actually would leave the rubies in the turntable because in the case of LPs, a little bit of extra brightness is good because the LPs were made from old tape systems, multi-track tape systems that didn't have the clarity and brightness that modern recordings do, being done digitally and so forth. So the deal is that I really like these. Now let me talk next about chasing the Oyaide or Oyaide, however you want to pronounce that. Further, there was a set of more expensive cables than these. These were $70. These were the Class A. They had, let me check my notes here. So the next one up was a Class S cable. The Class S cables, I don't remember what color they were now, but they were exactly like these, except they were more expensive. And they sounded exactly the same. I could not hear any difference between them. So why spend $110 for a set of cables where you can spend $70 and get they had a really nice case. I remember that. There was a round case because these are designed for DJs. And so they had a nice round case. You put them in the case and zip it up. It's really nice. But I don't need that. I'm putting them into a home stereo. So I'm not transporting it around. So a whole lot more money, $40 more, for cables that were just, you basically spent $40 for a different color. But the performance was the same. Then so I returned those. I went back and they have a $30 version, a Class B. These here, the yellow, the white and green ones. And these are close. They are not as bright as the orange ones, the Class A's, and they're down a little bit lower, I think, than the turquoise. Although I prefer, if I were to compare between the turquoise and these, I would prefer these for sure. They also have that warmth that the turquoise doesn't have. There's, once you hear these, then you put the turquoise in. Oh my gosh, these turquoises just don't make it. They sound kind of cheap. So it's remarkable, actually, the differences. Once you get to an active system and you've got high quality drivers in there, hard dome drivers, and you can hear all these differences, now this stuff does make a big difference. One last task I went after, I found online finally that Oyaide made another cable, and it was these here, and I intend to return these. And I'll just open up real quick and show you. So they're really nice and pretty. They're beautiful cables. Nice connectors on the end. Nice round. They're not flat wire like the others. It's a traditional round cable. No doubt there's high quality cable, but how did it perform? And these were $143. So they weren't cheap, and I had to order them directly from Japan. And that's been the problem. The supplier doesn't want to spend the money for the return, and Amazon requires that they honor the policy of offering a return, a full refund return. So I'm willing to ship them to them, but the shipping might be $50, and that wouldn't make any sense. But anyway, so those didn't perform as well. Let's see. My note says they're like the Supers, I think. They were in that range. Not near as bright, not even as bright as the turquoise, not as bright as these. They didn't have the warmth even that these have. And so it was very surprising. So that would be my recommendation now, and that's kind of it I want to share today, that these for $70 would be my final recommendation now. And I'm going to, as I said, buy another set of these and try them in the CD player so that I have 2 of the 3 sets going to the tweeter are these. And I can, of course, always replace the rubies going from the control amplifier, from the active electronic crossover to the tweeter amp, which is another set of these. I can replace those. So I can now I have a mechanism to constrain the overly bright high frequency response of this system, given that I've chosen these hard dome tweeters, and I have the 1050 Rotel amps, and that are very bright, and I have the AudioQuest FT4 wire, which is also very bright. And so I've kind of maximized the brightness of this system, and it kind of is overkill. I went a little too far, and that's kind of a judgment you make over time. I've had to make that judgment that the system's too bright, actually. So interesting that rather than I was desperate and thinking I may have to get an inline equalizer of some kind and just pull the high frequencies down a bit. And so this is a kind of a workaround solution that gives me actually a warmer, a little fuller, rounder bass response, a little less highs, a little less brittle. They just sound nice. So that's my recommendation. Oyaide, Oyaide, really nice. That's about all I have to share today. Feel free to comment, and I will see you all next time.